Hi there on Instagram. Shari Williams here with 6ABC in Philadelphia. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining us for this Instagram live conversation. I hope that you're out there and that you're listening. Betty Joe 93, you're the first person I see. I give a wave to you as well. I'm Shari Williams. Thank you so much, of course, for tuning in for this very important conversation that we are going to have tonight right here on Instagram. We started this African American series with a town hall of race, rage, and healing. Where do we go from here? Tonight is part 2. This one is about millennials of the movement. Where do we go from here? We will be talking and chatting with millennials who are engaged in this process, who care about this issue, of course, of racial injustice and also disparities in housing, economics, education, police brutality. All of these things are tied together as we talk about this very complex issue, racism and racial injustice. So thanks so much for tuning in right now. Miss Lady 222, I see you as well. So we will be taking a look at those of you who are tuning in and doing our best to look at the comments and the questions that may come up as we have this discussion. And I want to thank 6ABC for being on the front line of having this conversation and putting the importance on it that it deserves. Some people say it's been a long time coming, but here we are. The moment is here. You guys should be Gen Z. Yeah, trust me. Not only are we going to talk about millennials, but we understand that those who are younger than 23 are also very involved in the movement as well. Our first guest tonight is going to be Anthony Bellman. I'll be looking for your request, Anthony, as soon as you send it again for me. I'll bring you in. But we do know that the nation's youth are the ones who are really leading in a vast majority of the movement and the demonstrations that we are seeing on the streets. The millennials and those who are Generation Z have definitely made their presence known across the country. And yeah, HMO Poppy, we still have a long way to go. And that's why we want to have this conversation. I will still keep looking for Anthony, for you to join us as soon as I see your request. I'll bring you in. But we, of course, know that those who are in this age group, millennials, this is... when we say millennial, some people say, let's see if I can view this here. I'm going to pull you up, Anthony, because and I'm going to bring him in here. Anthony Bellman is the co-founder of Millennials in Action. And as soon as we can connect with him, I believe I've got him now. I'm going to adjust my screen here so you guys can still see my face. Anthony, can you hear me?
Yeah, Shari, I can hear you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. We really appreciate you taking the time and joining the conversation as we do our best to, of course, tackle the issues surrounding racial injustice. And so I want people to know a little bit about your background. And I think we're good here. You're still with me, Anthony?
Yeah, I'm still with you.
Okay, great. Anthony is the co-founder of Millennials in Action. He's also the political director for Representative Brendan Boyle. He happens to be the only Black political director in Pennsylvania to a congressman. And we also know you're the only millennial to serve as a delegate for Joe Biden, as he will be, of course, moving forward as the Democratic presidential nominee, the presumptive nominee for the party. So, Anthony, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And as we have observed and seen the reaction to, of course, this was really all sparked by the killing of George Floyd. It set off a reaction that maybe some people thought one day it would happen, but I think most people were shocked to see how much and how tremendous the response has been. Why do you think millennials have been so responsive to making their voices heard in this moment?
I think we just had enough. We just had enough. I was in college when Trayvon Martin happened. And I remember then it was an activism in all of us. And I was down in DC. I think I was in my senior year at GW. And I remember us just marching then. I remember the protests then. I remember everybody walking around with black hoodies and Skittles and iced tea, because those were the final things that he bought before he died that night. And so when we're living in a time where, you know, if our lives are not worth it, if we're not able to go out and fight for our own life, then we just had enough. And so I think right now, and yes, it was a combination of things. I think COVID-19 really, as much of a detriment as it is to society, it really blocked out everything. We couldn't turn on the TV and just, go on about our everyday life. We really had to focus, and everybody was at home and everybody was watching the exact same video of a police officer's knee on somebody's neck for 8 minutes and 42 seconds. And you can't turn away from it. So when you can't turn away from it, there's only two things you can do. You can try to ignore it, or you can do something about it. And in this instance, everybody decided to do something about it. And I'm glad they did.
How have you been involved so far? And maybe not just in this recent incident. I know you've been involved in trying to galvanize young people to get involved in what's happening in their community, but particularly any particular involvement to speak to with Black Lives Matter or in regards to pushing for justice?
Honestly, pushing for justice. Our first thing is that, I'm the co-founder for Millennials in Action, and what we are is that we're a political action committee that's geared towards inner city youth and making sure that Black and brown people have a voice at the table when it comes to policies being made about them in their community. And so what we did a couple of years ago is that we started a campaign that said Black Robes Matter. After the Black Lives Matter, it was Black Robes Matter. And Black Robes Matter was really an educational campaign geared towards the inner city to let them know that you vote for your judges, you vote for your district attorney, and you get all those people in office. And a lot of people don't know that. So, and I would always go before students and I'll tell them, yes, you guys might think that the governor and the president, those are the sexy elections. But guess what? When you get arrested, you don't go before the president of the United States. You don't go before the governor. You go before a judge. And not that many students in that classroom could honestly tell me that they knew that they vote in those judges. They have the opportunity to vote in those judges. And my thing is, if you vote in a judge who doesn't know your background, who doesn't understand where you come from, that just sees you as a number or a docket number or just another case they have before them, and they go ahead and make a decision about the rest of your life, that's not cool. So we need judges. They don't necessarily have to look like us, but they do have to understand where we come from, especially in the city of Philadelphia, where there's so many young Black men being locked up on a daily basis. And I tell students and I tell my young people all the time, it's easy to get locked up, and the law is there for your worst day. The law is there for when you have a bad day and you want to curse somebody out, or somebody steps on your sneakers, or somebody disrespects you, and that's when the law steps in. And if you don't have somebody that's on that bench that understands where your life came from and that can honestly point you in the right direction, not just send you upstate, but that can point you in the honest right direction in order to reform your life, then we're setting ourselves at a disadvantage.
How is that conversation going for those who are in this demographic, those who are between 23 and 38, and that really is the span of a millennial? How is that conversation being had among that group? Because we see so many people who truly just say they're not aware, or they don't understand, or what do you mean Black Lives Matter? Why does it have to be centered on Black Lives Matter? Have you gotten that question as well?
I have gotten that question. I've definitely gotten the question of all lives matter. And this is not just from, and then we also coupled that with, well, if Black lives matter so much, then why do Black people kill other Black people? That's a question I get. Why do Black people kill other Black people? And to that, I really just have to respond to them and say, it's not necessarily that, that Black people don't care about other Black people when there's a killing. I mean, we live in the city of Philadelphia where there's 171 killings in 161 days. For me, that's a crazy number, and it needs to stop. And that's a number that we live in on a daily basis. And as a political director, for a member of Congress, my day is crazy. It would be some day where I am at a community event with an ambassador for a foreign come home at that same time, and I live in the hood. I live in Allen, and I have to deal with. And one time I came home and there was a body in the street, and there were hundreds of people around. And that's the reality of living in the city of Philadelphia. We live with death. We live with violence on a daily basis. Our people have PTSD, and they might not even know they have PTSD. but they have PTSD. And while, you know, the summertime, there's a lot of fireworks going around, we can't tell if it's fireworks or if it's gunshots. And that's the reality of what we're living in. So yes, I get those questions about all lives matters. I get those questions about whether, you know, a black on black killing. But my thing about it is, if a black person kills another black person in the city of Philadelphia and they have the evidence, and they don't necessarily need video footage to be that evidence. But if they have the evidence and they go to trial and the person is convicted, they go to jail. From killing a black person, they will go to jail. If a black person kills another black person, they will go to jail. Our problem is that if people who are sworn to protect us, they are sworn to uphold the law and kill people and murder people like we see in the case of George Floyd, you should go to jail. That's all we're saying. That's all we're asking for.
The other thing to be added about that, there are those who say this phrase, by the way, in regards to black on black crime, is not a real phrase. And why are those who say that in favor of that? The statistics show that those who commit homicide against victims who look like them. So the thing about that, it's not about black on black crime. It's that whatever your race is, you are more prone to injure or kill someone who is of your same race. So it's happening in the white community, in the Asian community, it's across the board. So that's a phrase that definitely raises a lot of question of if it should even be used when we say that phrase, black on black crime. Talk to me about your actual personal feelings. You are a black man. You've watched what has happened. So how is it for you, Anthony?
I would say for the past couple of weeks, it's trauma. It's constant trauma. And it's not even, I can't even say it, honestly, the past couple of weeks since Trayvon Martin, to be able to watch people with your skin color be murdered, and people will have the videotape of the murder, and whether the cops will have it, you know, from their chest, or in the case of Mr. Aubrey, you know, that videotape, and having to watch those, sometimes I can't even watch it because I don't want to get into that zone in my mind, that my life doesn't matter because I'm a black man. And it's something that we deal with on a daily basis, and it's not cool. It's not cool. And I will promote mental health as much as possible. I talk to my therapist about it.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm so glad to hear you say that. Because some people, it's been for a long time, as we know, a stigma associated with talking out your feelings and expressing how you feel. And we need to move past that, particularly in the African-American community. We have to move past that. I'm a huge advocate of mental health as well. A part of my background in studies is in counseling. And we have to find a way to walk this thing out and talk this thing out, and do that and promote that among each other. I'm glad to hear.
And I would just say, it's not, you know, when people say therapy, it doesn't necessarily mean that something is detrimentally wrong with you, that you have bipolar, and those people should seek help, you know, if they need it. But just like we go to a doctor, we need to go to a therapist, and just to make sure we can get that mental health.
People are definitely responding to what you are saying. The comments, guys, thank you so much. Continuing to weigh in on what's being said here by Anthony. Anthony, what can we do? How are we going to move from the protests? They matter. They got people's attention, and it then put attention on the message. And we need to make sure we continue to focus on the message, which is there is a real injustice that needs to be addressed, and racism needs to be eradicated as much as possible and called out. So how do we then move from protesting to getting change in policy, and how can those listening figure out a way to join other millennials in the movement?
Well, and first I want to say, I've heard this question a lot too, about how do we move past protesting. I don't think right now is the time to think about moving past protesting, meaning that I don't think we should stop protesting. I think it was effective. I think it got people's attention. And I think we need to highlight there are some other things in the system that need to be highlighted that we might need to protest about. $15 an hour minimum wage, protest about it. Criminal justice reform, protest about it. And there is something to be said about that protest and numbers of people getting together in the streets to let the powers that be hear them and actually go ahead and make those changes. We got some changes right here in the state of Pennsylvania that needs to be done. So the protesting piece in itself about people galvanizing about their issues, I don't say stop that. I don't think it's time to move on from that. I think it's time to keep going. I think it's time to keep protesting. I think it's time to keep staying out in the streets. But we need to couple that with advocacy for policy. And that involves writing your elected officials. That involves calling your elected officials. Like I said, you know, I'm the political director for a member of Congress, but my first job starting with a member of Congress 5 years ago was constituent service. And my job was to listen to every single issue that people had. And I'm telling you, when people call, when people email your elected officials, when people write, when people tweet, your elected official has to pay attention, and I'm telling you, it is very effective. So whatever your issue is, don't stop protesting, but make sure you turn that protest and you turn that anger into action. Call people, call your elected officials, and let them know exactly how you feel about the issues in your life.
NYCE 73, which might be nice 73, says, yeah, we need to combine the protesting with also moving to the next issues, coupling it with action. I see your comments.
Yes.
Another comment very quickly, at Bree Kate, how can people get involved with your organization specifically, Anthony? Because you are with Millennials in Action. So how can people, if they want to know more about that particular organization and anything else you want to add, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you. So if you guys want to get involved with Millennials in Action, please go ahead and follow us on Instagram, MIA_PAC. That's Millennials in Action _PAC, which stands for PAC, or Political Action Committee. Go ahead, follow us on Instagram, get involved. You can also go to our website at www.miapac.org. .com, excuse me. And I want you guys to all get involved. And I know we have some other guests. So I am going to leave, but I just really want people to know that we have an election that's coming up in November, and it is our time to vote. And I'm telling you, this is going to be the most important election probably since Abraham Lincoln. When people say the soul of our nation is at stake, it is an honest to God truth. The soul of our nation is at stake, and I need everybody to come out and vote. And I was just having this conversation with a bunch of millennials earlier today. Look, if you were supporting somebody that did not get the nominee, our responsibility is to vote. And as millennials, we're a little bit older now. You know, we're in our 30s, we're having kids, we're buying houses. And so we know that responsibility, you might not get everything you want. You might not have gotten the person that you want, but your responsibility to your neighborhood, your responsibility to your community is to make sure you go out and you vote for the person, the best person that's going to fight on your behalf. And if you think that nobody is the best person, I would please just beg everybody, go do your research on what is going on in this country. Go ahead and do your research on the candidates and make sure that you vote in November. That's all we can do. Because guess what? If we don't have the people elected into office that will go ahead and make the changes for us, then the protesting, the writing letters, all of that stuff is for nothing. Because if they don't care, if they don't have it in their hearts to care, then they just won't care. There will be no action. You can go ahead and yell all you want to. You can scream all you want to. But if the right person is not in office, then everything that we're doing is for nothing. So in November, please vote, please vote, please vote.
Okay. Anthony Bellman, co-founder of Millennials in Action. Thank you so much for joining us here on our town hall, the African American series that we are continuing. Millennials of the movement, where do we go from here? We appreciate your voice. And of course, we'll be in touch. And as more things come up, Anthony, of course, we'll be in touch with you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I want now to go ahead and invite up our next guest, who is invited to be a part of this tonight, and that's Miss Brittany Smalls. Brittany Smalls is going to join us. Do we have any comments from anyone? Nikki Hawkins is joining me here in the studio, helping me go through this as I just read through the comments that are being made here. I think some people are just really stressing that voting and the power of voting. Keeps reading here.
That's one question from keep reading the post. Just keep reading the comments.
I think too we got a comment from, I believe this would be Doretha Russell, who just said some Black youth react out of fear of how they are approached. And of course, we know trust is a big concern in the African American community. I think I've got Brittany here. And we'll bring in Brittany Smalls. Brittany, how are you?
Hi, how you doing tonight, Shari?
I'm doing great. I hope you were listening in to Anthony and his comments.
I was. That's my
I'm
brother
going
in
to
the
ask you
movement.
to turn your audio down just a tad.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Let me introduce you to those who are listening in. Anthony was our first guest, and now is Brittany Smalls, statewide coordinator for Pennsylvania Black Voters Matter Fund. Let me make sure. Maybe Brittany, can I get you to turn it down just a tad, I think.
Okay. How's that?
Yeah. How's that? Yeah, we're getting a little bit of feedback. It's live Instagram. So for those of you tuning in, I think you know how this goes, but we want to get it to a place where everyone can hear what you have to say. Let me hear you now, Brittany.
How's that?
Oh, I think we got something here. Much better. Brittany Smalls, statewide coordinator for Pennsylvania Black Voters Matter Fund, also former president of Millennials in Action. So you know a lot about that particular organization. And we're glad to have you on and to lend your voice as well as to what is happening. When you saw the incident involving George Floyd and you saw how George Floyd died, what was the conversation among yourself and your millennial friends?
So I tell people all the time that right now, this moment feels like I'm planning for a funeral because being a part of Black Voters Matter, I do my work 365. So, you know, we're always engaged. We're always in protest. In South Carolina, when they had their primaries during Super Tuesday, we were there on the ground holding the elected officials accountable. So it just becomes like a redundant act, and it makes me feel a little numb. And my friends felt the same way.
I think we've gotten to a point where we're doing our best not to lose hope. And I know that we can't. But I think we also know then that means we have to figure out what's the agenda and then what's going to be the plan of action. When you see all of the millennials and also Generation Z out there marching and protesting, did that surprise you, the level of reaction that followed what happened to George Floyd?
No, it didn't surprise me because, again, as Anthony said, this was coupled with COVID-19. We had a lot of idle time. We had a lot of time to think. And, you know, at some point, if you know this from the previous in history, once we got tired, we got tired. And once we got to the point where there was no return, it was bound to happen. And you have to think about each incident. Like, it was George Floyd, yeah, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and it was like back to back to back.
Yeah. And it made people really feel like enough, yes, clearly, because then people spilled out into the streets. And what has been so interesting to so many people, the vast majority of those who are out there making their voices heard, they are 18 to 23, 23 to 35 years old, also multicultural.
Yes, it is. And we see it. We see, I think it's beautiful, but I think at the same instance, we have to owe not only people of color, but people who are not of our natural race, we have to make sure that they are involved. You know, we have to make sure they're not accepting it, hold their people accountable as well. They have to join us. It's their responsibility.
And tell me then, what have you been doing in the past couple of months, and how has that organizing worked? What does that look like? How is it getting young people involved? Do you find that to be a task, or do you find that as long as they have an outlet, they're willing to join? Talk to us about how the organizing goes.
I think organizing goes with consistency. So I think a lot of times we have people come into our communities that are not necessarily of our communities, and they try to tell us what to do or what we, just give us enlightenment, and it's not a trust there. And so what Black Voters Matters does is we build coalitions with grassroots organizations that are already in those communities and help them with resources and help them with visibility because they know their people. And so I think a lot of times I'm at a lot of like progressive group meetings, and when you attend these meetings, most of the time I'm the only person of color in the room. And I said, that's an issue because if somebody that lives on my block, you approach them and tell them, why they need to vote, they're not going to hear you. It has to be
Let's talk
people
about
out there.
that. Let's talk about that. Then what is the work that needs to be done? So you're not the only one in the room. How then do we get those who look like you and like-minded, or maybe need, if through education, could become like-minded if they were given more of the tools and information? So how do we do that?
First, we have to offer them opportunities. Most of the people that we're trying to engage have some sense of disenfranchisement and they have a distrust of the system. And we have to let them know there's opportunities for them too. If you want to run for, Jeff Johnson said one time, he said, if you want to run for office, we should have somebody from that community, train them up for 4 years and give them the tools needed so they can represent their communities. So we have to talk about the career opportunities that are available for this. And I mean, it's good to volunteer. I think that everybody should volunteer for different opportunities, but we also need to let them know the career opportunities that are available in the political realm as well.
Well, we've got a question about how can people become more educated about who they're voting for. At Love She says, how do we get to know the candidate to vote for? And how do we fix this in our community? So I think her question is, or he, Love She, is how do we get information in people's hands? And I think the next question is going to be, how do we get people to leave their house and go out and vote also? So their question is, people are in the street and they're protesting, but come November, can we get them in the ballot box?
Well, we have to place that accountability on the candidates that are running. What people need to know first is that there's an election every 6 months. But those candidates that want to represent you in your community, they need to be going into the community and actually meeting with their peers. They need to, who they want to represent. We have to hold the candidates accountable and to a regard that the people in the community see them. And we have to make sure that we are not just voting down the list, because I know I used to be an irresponsible voter. I used to go into the polls and just hit straight Democrat because I didn't know any better. But I think that, word of mouth is the best tool that we have, because think about it, when we see things, and we have to make it more attractive. I know as a part of Millennials in Action, we used to hold different events like Pool and Politics. We did karaoke nights. We went to areas that were not the most comfortable to be in because we wanted to see, hey, this person, we wanted them to see the candidates. We didn't hold events in Center City or, other parts of the nicer areas or in ballrooms or anything. We held events right in the communities for the candidates to come and meet with them one-on-one.
We've got someone just being very honest right here on Instagram. El Grande Fear says, I don't even know my neighborhood rep. If somebody for the most part, there's a high percentage of us, Brittany, who have cell phones. And I tell my nieces and my friends, everything we're looking for is probably right there in our hand. So for someone like El Grande Fierce, and he wants to know how to figure out the rep, I mean, there's got to be a way to easily put in your zip code.
Yeah.
Information, right?
So I always recommend like Committee of 70. If you put your zip code, your full address, they'll give you a list of all.
Committee of 70, just so people can understand. So it's a non-profit, non-affiliated political group that tries to really only engage citizens about voting.
Yes. It's a nonpartisan. It's not.
70. Yeah, Committee of 70, El Grande Fierce, if you want to look for
Yes.
their website. Go ahead.
Yes.
I'm
You
sorry,
can put
Brittany.
your, yeah, yeah, 70.org. You can put your information in, and they will give you a list of all of your elected officials. And once you get that information, it's up to you to reach out to them and hold them accountable.
There it is. I think someone, thank you, Darisha Media put visit70.org. So hopefully that's correct. We'll double check that. Brittany, you personally have been involved with organizing some of the protests in regards for Black Lives Matter here recently. Talk to me about that. And then the follow-up, you also were back in the community when some things, quite frankly, were torn down.
Yes.
We saw how disappointed some people were. We also know there absolutely were some people involved with destroying the city that have nothing to do with the cause. We understand that, but it happened. So talk to me about your involvement on the recent protest you organized.
Well, the reason why I decided to, organize a protest and be a part of protests that were going on around the state was because I couldn't just sit on my hands. And I think this is a time where we're kind of in confusion and we don't understand everything that's going on. But I'll just challenge everybody, just do something. Whether you're talking to your neighbor, you're challenging your peers, like just do something. And that's where my hope was. I said, I can't save the world, but I can do something. And so organizing these protests, it wasn't like hate rallies or anything like that. It's just more of being a part of and allowing my peers and my family and my friends to understand that we have a voice. Everybody knows that I didn't really get involved in the political arena until I was in my mid-20s. I didn't grow up with people who were involved on the political scene. I really just took an interest in it because of the failing systems that I was a part of. And so my thing was just uplifting them, understanding that we still have obligations, voting, demanding respect, making sure our concerns are heard, and making sure that we understand I got your back. I
Yeah.
got your back.
Is there anything else, Brittany, you want to add from your involvement and your engagement for those who are listening or who will watch this later, because we will be posting it? How can people get involved? What is the next step for someone who's watching who now wants to take a step of action?
Like I said, just do something. So Saturday morning, that I think it was a Saturday morning. I'm not sure what the exact day was because every day seems the same since we're in a pandemic. But when I saw that the looting happened, I said I have to be accountable. This is my community as well. So I just called up my elected officials. I called a couple people in the community, Nicetown CDC, and some other organizations. And I said, hey, there was looting that happened directly in our community. Let's go clean it up. Everybody bring a trash bag. Everybody bring a broom. Let's do this together. And we went to 3 different spots. The last spot that I went to was a Black-owned hair salon. And I was so disrupted by that, that she didn't even, sometimes we don't have the resources that other communities have when it comes to the luxury of insurance and things like that. So I was just it was so heartfelt for me. So it's like, I'm going to be standing with the protests, and I'm also going to be accountable for my community as well. So we have to do something.
Your point. I think you're saying if you care, then find a way to put that care into action.
Yes.
And it may not always be someone's going to come knock on our door and say, hey,
No.
come join. We have to sometimes make sure we're
You're
active,
Black.
we're engaged.
You're Black. Even another initiative that was started was we started delivering medicine for people who didn't have pharmacies directly in their area or was affected by the looting. And it was just like, I put a call to action out on Facebook and people responded. So I don't want people to think their action is too small. And also, as the statewide coordinator of Black Voters Matter, we do political advocacy 365 days a year. And we have a number you can text 797979. Text We Matter, WEMATTER, to 797979. And then it's going to be a prompt on there, and you can add your information to the database, and then we can stay in touch that way. And if you want to be involved in political advocacy, pushing the election on November 3rd, let us know.
797979. You can text "We Matter" to that and get some more information. Brittany Smalls, I really appreciate you joining us. This is a very important topic. We're doing our best to make sure we reach all these different types of demographics who definitely hold power. We have to know that we can make change. That the power really is in the people's hand. It's just a matter of what we do with it. But this is so important to us here. Our African American series, this town hall, this is our second one. Millennials of the Movement. Where do we go from here? Brittany Smalls, statewide coordinator for Pennsylvania Black Voters Matter Fund. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Shari. And you enjoy the rest of your evening. All
right, you too. I hope you'll keep listening because we've got one more guest coming up.
I am.
Take care.
I am.
Okay, Brittany. Comment now that we just got from CMW Philly Born. Says, I have a 20-year-old and I appreciate this platform, this conversation we're having tonight. I love to listen to the voice of our young generation. And the truth about it is, no movement has gone forward without the voice and participation of those who are the young people of this nation. That's just true if you look back repeatedly in history. It's also, though, been true that those who are between 18 and 34 sometimes have the lower turnout at the polls compared to those who are older than them. So that is a big part of something that has to change. Those of you who are millennials and Generation Z who are listening, you have to know that voting matters. And some people are expecting that age group not to vote, quite frankly. They would love for you not to, because then your voice isn't heard in the elections and to people of power and in position. And if you vote, maybe you can prove some people wrong. And they're not expecting this age group to hit the polls. My next guest is Lauren Footman. Lauren, if you're listening, if you would make the request, I'll bring you in as well. We really do appreciate all these comments that are coming in. Thank you, Shaniqua Black Queen, for telling me this is very important. I agree with you. And as someone, of course, who's been here at Action News for 6 years, this is very important to me personally and to this station. So we want to continue to have these conversations. Lauren, if you'll try me one more time, I'll find you.
More comments than she just sent.
Let's see who else on here. Darisha Media weighing in again, saying this interview is very timely and needed. We have a lot of work to do because of the low voter turnout that happened on June 2nd. Of course, that was for the primary. She's also giving the reminder the census is out to make sure that if you can make sure someone in your household or you yourself can fill out that census, please do. Joining me now, my third guest for tonight. Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Hi, Shari. How are you?
I'm great. Good to see you.
This
is Lauren Footman, Director of Outreach and Equity for the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. She's also the former president of NAACP's Pennsylvania State Conference Youth and College Division. Lauren, I appreciate you lending your voice and being here tonight. We're having a great discussion. A number of millennials, and we've talked about, well, what is that age group? You know, those who are 23 to 38, but also the age group right under there. We've seen that group, 18 and up, also on the streets. Talk to me, Lauren, about what you have observed about the demonstrations as people make their voices heard, standing up against racism and racial injustice.
Absolutely. What I've observed is that, as Al Sharpton so eloquently said last week, Black folks are tired of America having their knee on our necks, and so figuratively and literally. And I think that we've seen a culmination of physical violence and structural violence in the last couple months, whether it's COVID-19 and the health disparities within our communities of color, and whether we see the ongoing police violence that we've seen for years, whether it's lynching, whether it's shooting. And then we also see the gun violence. I saw that that was a topic that came up earlier. And so I think a lot of times people say black on black crime, and I know you were talking about that earlier, but a
Yes.
big part of what that stems from is from the structural violence that our communities continue to experience, whether it's inadequate education, inadequate social services. So whether it's underfunding for public education. So I think what we've really seen is a culmination of all of these different social ills, whether it's comorbidities of health, really conflate and exacerbate one another. And I think that people are tired. It's been over 450 years of this ongoing struggle for communities, particularly for Black communities. And I think at this point, people are really ready to have their voices heard. And I think that we've seen people not just do one protest, we've seen almost 2 weeks of protests. And I think people are recognizing that in this moment, we have to use our voices. And then also we're recognizing that people are really starting to move. One of the things that I noticed when the bill, when we just had the hearing the other day in the judiciary in Congress, a lot of the things that people were talking about, they weren't new topics. We've known what needed to be done around police accountability and reform. People really just hadn't taken the time to really put their money where their mouth is and then really invest in our communities. And so I think that we're seeing a culmination of a long time of communities being tired of being sick and tired and really rising up to fight for liberation for Black communities.
Do you think this age group, this block, understands the power that they wield? Do you think that people really get it, that they truly can impact where they live? Because we see so much apathy.
I definitely do. I think we've seen it nationally, and I think we've seen it locally. I think one of the things that was so interesting to me when the protests first started, some of the conversations seemed that oftentimes that things didn't even seem possible. We've seen this ongoing conversation just in the city of Philadelphia around the controversial Frank Rizzo statue and what he has meant to the city of Philadelphia. But because of these protests and because of people really unifying their voices and having this inside-outside approach, we've started to see some movement with things that people had told us just weren't available or even an option, or we had to wait. Because I think that that's something that people often tell Black communities a lot of, well, just wait your turn and it'll come. I think the apathy, I empathize and I sympathize with it because we recognize it is triggering and it is traumatizing to see that someone could so coldly just kill someone in broad daylight and put their hand in their pocket as if they were having a sip of water. So I understand the apathy, but I think people are starting to see the power of their voice, definitely.
We do have a couple of people who are weighing in here on the live comments, asking, Wild Child DC is asking, for those who are the white allies, those of us who don't have this Black and brown skin, but they want to push for the message and bring about change, how can they continue to be helpful and to be involved in pushing for racial equality and justice and equality, just period?
So I think we've graduated from allies to accomplices in this moment. I really think that this is an opportunity to listen to those closest to the pain and closest to the trauma. It's really time to center the voices of communities most impacted and take their lead. I think the biggest thing that we always want to fix something. I know when I am an ally or an accomplice to some other person's work, it's like, well, I have the solution. But a big part of the organizing that we do at the coalition and at the Ed Fund is making sure that the communities that we're helping, we recognize that they already know what they need. And so that's what I would encourage anyone who is wanting to enter in this space as an ally or an accomplice to really uplift the lived experience and the work and the advocacy that didn't just start. Like we have seen, whether it was the Greenboro sit-in or whether it was Black Lives Matter, Black people, particularly young Black people, have been leading this work for a long time. So I think the best way is really recognizing, listening to them, that the people that are most impacted and that have been leading this work, and really taking a step back and continue to center their voices.
Yeah, what's that easy step for anyone if they're trying to figure out how do I get involved? I mean, does it have to be something really elaborate, or can it really be something smaller for those who want to know how to get involved? What do we tell them, Lauren?
So absolutely. I think that you have to enter where you're comfortable. I think with advocacy, you want to be as authentic as possible. And so one of the biggest things that we need to think about, whether it's going to your local community meeting or whether it's figuring out a local nonprofit that's working with disadvantaged youth, because it's a holistic conversation. I think sometimes when we talk about police accountability or whether it's gun violence or access to healthcare, it's all structural. And so a lot of these same issues, figure out what your issue of focus is. It may be education, it may be food deserts or environmental aspects, because these are all things that really impact our communities. So whether it's looking online to figure out what a local group is, whether you want to volunteer with them, whether you want to donate financial resources, whether you want to go to your local hearing with your local council and say like, hey, what are we doing around police accountability? I'll give a personal example. So I live right outside of Southwest Philadelphia. And so I live in a predominantly community of color, but our law enforcement is predominantly white. And so I have a good working rapport with our chief of police and also with our mayor who oversees our public safety. But when the George Floyd incident happened, it gave me a moment for pause. I said, moments like this provide opportunity for reflection. So just because we haven't had these issues doesn't mean that we can't take the time to revisit to see, are there different things that we need to revisit, whether it's how we do de-escalation, how we approach unconscious bias training. And so I wasn't responding because something was wrong, but it's just asking the question and keeping the line of communication open. One thing I will also add, when I was at Bryn Mawr College, a lot of the work that we did when I started the NAACP there was looking at law enforcement relations, because we were on the main line and recognizing the historic conversation around Black communities in the mainline police department and what that meant for our college campus. And it's an ongoing conversation that I always tell people, don't wait to always have the conversation when things erupt. Always be working towards it in the middle. So start these conversations when the tensions aren't as high when possible, because when these tensions do arise, there's more of a trust that's built, because as we said, there's a lack of trust. And so how we move forward is to start to rebuild those relationships intentionally.
We definitely have people who are weighing in who are just admitting that they are white, they are Caucasian, and they want to listen and they want to be a part of this dialogue and a part of the solution. So we've got all types of people who are listening tonight, and that is the point of all of this.
Absolutely.
Lauren, when we saw the reaction of what happened following George Floyd, people definitely took to the streets. They hit the pavement, and people are still protesting. Give me your comments and your thoughts on how do we integrate from protesting or continuing to protest and then bringing about policy change? Because at some point we need to see some things in black and white and actionable change.
Absolutely. And so that's where my sweet spot is. So a lot of the work that I do at the coalition is working with policy and working with those most impacted. And so recognizing that people come to this work with a lot of different lived experience. And so a big part of our work is meeting people where they are. So a lot of, as what Brittany and Anthony both shared, going into the communities that are most impacted and meeting them where they are and starting to build those relationships and providing them what the access necessary. So whether it's making sure that we're inviting communities most impacted to the meetings, or making sure that we're using our leverage and our ability to bring elected officials, because we have organizational backing and stature, to make sure that they're listening to those most impacted. But the biggest thing that I would really say is that we really have to pay attention to what's happening. As we see, I don't know if folks are following, that the city of Philadelphia, and like a lot of cities around the country, are revisiting their budgets as it relates to balancing the books because of COVID-19, and then also the social unrest and what that economic impact. And so that is a great way. The budgets and the policy go hand in hand. And I think sometimes we don't always have those conversations together, but those are the things that will impact us from some time to come. So whether we're increasing the budgets of the police department and defunding parks and recreations or gun violence prevention, these are the types of things that we need people to start paying attention to. But I think a big part of this is recognizing that you don't have to figure out the policy by yourself. There's lots of organizations that are here to educate you, are here to work with you, or help here to help you craft legislation. I think it's just figuring out what area and what role you want to play, and figuring out an organization, whether it's a local or a national organization, that aligns with your values, because recognizing we all have a part to play, and recognizing some people do want to just do the organizing, because we need people to stay in the street. I don't think it's time to stop. I think we saw in Ferguson, they stayed in they protested a long time after Mike Brown. I think we need the inside outside approach. I think that it's truly effective. I think that that is what has continued really to move the needle this time. So I definitely think that people should definitely engage with policy organizations. People can always reach out to us at the Ed Fund as it relates to gun violence prevention. I know you all will provide other organizations where folks can learn more about policy, but it's just taking it bit by bit, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Okay. Lauren Footman, I appreciate you so much for joining us here on the Instagram Live on the 6ABC Action News page. Lauren Footman, Director of Outreach and Equity, the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. We'll be in touch, Lauren. Thank you so much for being a part of this, okay? Take care. So for those of you who tuned in tonight, thank you so kindly. And no gun zone, I hear you. You want to make sure that this conversation that we're having tonight isn't just a moment, and that we will continue to carry this into a momentous way that will lead to action. We hear you, and we stand with you on that. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Of course, this is our second town hall. The first one was this past Sunday, Race, Rage, and Healing. Where do we go from here? For those of you who tuned in and watched this past Sunday, it was the most watched program in that hour. So we know people care about this. And tonight, part 2, Millennials of the Movement. Where do we go from here? I want to thank my guests, Anthony Bellman, Brittany Smalls, and Lauren Footman, and you so much for joining this conversation. We are going to post this, of course, on our 6ABC platforms, and this will not be the last time that 6ABC is a part of this conversation. We will continue to have stories that spotlight and highlight problems and also solutions when it comes to racial injustice. I'm Shari Williams. Have a great night. Thanks so much for joining.